Okay, so why are people drawn to it? What are the strongest arguments for it? I've identified what I think are the four major ones. The first argument is the cultural differences argument, and it's the idea that relativism is a strong explanation for why cultures have different moral values. That is, the differences among cultures cast doubt on the idea that there's a single true morality. So, for example, James Rachels tells the story of how the Greeks believed it was right to burn the dead, while the Galatians disagreed and believed it was right to eat them. So, to the Greeks, burning the dead was honorable. To the Galatians, it was basically skipping dinner. These apparent moral differences suggest there's no single objective truth about how to treat the dead, just different cultural norms. And every culture creates its own moral code. That means that no culture's morality is better than any others. So thinkers in history like Montaigne, Franz Boas, and the ancient sophists use this kind of reasoning to argue that morality is culturally relative, probably culturally relative. So in short, relativism seems to be one explanation for why cultures seem to have different moral codes. Now, we'll address the criticisms against this type of thinking in the next section, but I can say it's like every culture got their own moral IKEA instructions with no shared Allen wrench. All right, the next argument for the form of moral relativism called cultural relativism is that it promotes tolerance and avoids ethnocentrism. So ethnocentrism is the idea that one's own culture or group is superior to others, and so we use our own group standards to judge others. Ethnocentrism is basically that friend who travels to another country and then complains that the food isn't like it is at home. Relativism says, well, maybe you're the problem, Greg. This argument is especially common among those who have read some anthropology texts. The thought is that non-relativistic approaches can lead to racism, ethnocentrism, imperialism, and intolerance, whereas relativism supposedly implies there are many valid ways to live and so encourages tolerance. The relativist believes that if each culture has its own valid moral code, then we shouldn't judge others by our own standards. As Ruth Benedict put it in Patterns of Culture, we should embrace the, quote, coexisting and equally valid patterns of life that humanity has created. So in short, some people are drawn to relativism because they believe it is the only or the best alternative to evils like ethnocentrism and intolerance. Now, we'll address the criticisms of these arguments in the next section, but one notable strength of this approach is its ability to highlight and help us think about ethnocentrism. It encourages us to examine the standards that we use to judge others and ensure that they're fair and universally applicable rather than just shaped by the biases of our own culture. And relativism, on the surface at least, seems to support tolerance and avoid ethnocentrism. Relativism is the philosophical version of smiling politely while your friend tells you that pineapple belongs on pizza. Okay, the third reason. So the third reason people are drawn to relativism is because they believe morality must be relative if God does not exist, or if they aren't sure if God exists or what he commands. Now, if there's no God, the main argument goes, and there's no absolute moral authority. And so moral values must be human inventions or fictions or constructs created by cultures, power structures, or individuals. Now, this view has deep historical roots. Many philosophers have challenged the idea of God, and with it, the idea of objective moral truth. Nietzsche, for example, who some consider a relativist, and I'm one of those, Nietzsche famously declared that God is dead, a claim with radical implications for morality in this case, and for truth. So, in short, the argument is that if God doesn't exist, then morality must be invented by humans individually or collectively. So we have cultural relativism. They believe that morality must be relative if God, or something like a God, does not exist. And it's interesting, as you reflect on that if morality is just a human invention, then technically your HOA might be the most powerful moral authority on earth. Okay, to summarize, some people are relativists because they believe God does not exist. But just in passing for now, I should mention that there are moral non-relativists, that is, moral objectivists like Peter Singer and Sam Harris, who are atheists. So not everyone who rejects God is a moral relativist. Okay, so the fourth and final major reason many people are drawn to moral relativism, especially cultural relativism in this video, is perhaps the most profound. It stems from the belief that moral values, unlike factual claims in math or science, moral values cannot be objectively proven, not even in principle. This is known as the fact-value divide, or the is-ought divide. So, for example, we can demonstrate that 2 plus 2 equals 4, or that a scientific theory is true or false in principle, even if not yet proven in practice, like a string theory in physics. Moral claims, however, seem different. We don't encounter moral values or any values in the world the way that we do physical objects like trees or toasters or atoms. They don't appear to be part of the fabric of reality in the same way. And because of this, many conclude that morality is inherently subjective or culturally relative, rooted in individual or cultural perspectives and values rather than in objective truths. Now, philosophers like Gilbert Harman have defended this view, and even David Hume, though he himself was not a relativist, even David Hume contributed to its foundations by emphasizing the distinction between facts and values. So again, when I go shopping at Walmart, I might run into toasters, but I don't bump into moral values like it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering. And even though I don't bump into mathematical truths, it seems like moral values like it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering is quite different from the objective claim that 2 plus 2 equals 4 or 5. In other words, most people see that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but try saying murder is wrong and suddenly you're in a 3-hour seminar debate, an existential crisis, and then someone's quoting Nietzsche with interpretive dance. Okay. Now, when you think about this argument, some also combine it with the cultural differences argument. So the thought goes like this. If morality were truly objective, wouldn't there be more agreement, or at least some kind of proof? And if moral values exist, should we run into them, like we run into toasters at Walmart? So among both scholars and students, I found that many are drawn to relativism because of this fact-value divide combined with some of the other reasons. Even if they can't quite put it into philosophical terms, they believe that morality is built on subjective values, not objective facts, and so conclude that it can't be truly objective. And for now, I'll avoid the more technical terms like cognitivism, non-cognitivism, error theory, metaethics. They aren't necessary to grasp the core idea here. The core idea is that the fact-value divide is yet another reason why many people find relativism appealing. So to summarize, people are drawn to relativism for many reasons, and I've identified 4 major ones. Cultural relativism seems to explain cultural differences, promote tolerance, replace religious morality, and flow from the fact-value divide. A language then unfolds from this belief in relativism. Their truth instead of the truth. It's wrong to me or my culture instead of it's just wrong. To each their own instead of, hey, that's just wrong. Truth with a little t instead of truth with a big T. Who are we to judge instead of, you should judge that as wrong. And the idea that something is a social construct is often partly or fully derived from this principle of relativism. Okay, now we're ready for the criticisms against it.